Welcome to Cut the Bull, an insightful podcast which addresses the news of the day and the cultural issues plaguing our society, bringing logic and context to these topics and discussing solutions too real for mainstream pundits. Now, here are your hosts, Charles Love, Shamika Michelle, and Wilfred Riley.
Hello and welcome to Cut the Bull. I am Charles Love alongside my co-host Shamika Michelle and Wilfred Riley. And our guest this week is Natasha Dunn. She is the co-founder of the Black Community Collaborative, right?
Community Collaborative, yes.
Natasha, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And many of you may know Natasha from a viral video about the migrant issue in the country, but specifically on Chicago's South Side. And I wanted Natasha to come on and kind of talk about how that came about and what's going on there. And I reached out to her meeting. So I've been mentioning, so obviously I moved to New York from Chicago. So I know Natasha and a couple of the people who were in that press conference. So when I saw it, I'm like, oh, I need to talk to them and get the skinny on what's going on there. So Natasha, give us a bit of a background on how you found out about it and pick it up from there.
So I live in the South Shore community. So they picked the right and the wrong neighborhood to do this in. I'll put it like that. I always say that I just wish that I could just, live my best Black life and just enjoy it, bake cookies and, just go out and enjoy the world without having to always be an activist. Mm-hmm. But what happened was they sent out, I got a text message from a friend with a meeting notice that the mayor and the aldermen were going to be hosting a meeting to discuss housing asylum seekers in the old South Shore building. That building is not too far from where I live. I just bought my home literally 4 months ago. I worked hard to get this home, to get my little piece of American dream, to build equity and wealth for my family. And I was like, this can't happen. Like, this is just, I don't understand what's going on. And so when I further looked into it, I realized that I wasn't the only one who was confused about this meeting. And the fact that that building was always supposed to be the community's. I've been involved in my community for years, and we created plans for that building. And the alderman was supposed to give it to us immediately after the police academy moved out. So the building was temporarily housing the Chicago and Fire Police Academy, which the neighbors who surround that block, before I moved in, they agreed to go along with it because it would foster a good relationship with the Black community and the police. And then it also was supposed to be an opportunity for the community to use that space as well, to have meetings, do mentorship and all kind of programs in that building. But after, it was supposed to turn into a space for us to be able to use as well. So long story, we got this short, we got the notice, and I started calling neighbors and called the alderman, and she pretended as if she didn't know. She had just found out, just like everyone else, even though the meeting said it was by her and the mayor. And that was on a Monday. By Tuesday, people who tried to register, they actually created a link where you had to go online and register to get a ticket. And you're only given one ticket to go to a meeting about housing migrants.
About your community.
In our neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
And, by Tuesday, it was saying that it was full. So there were no more tickets to give out. So Wednesday morning, I wrote a open letter to the mayor, Mayor Lightfoot, Michelle Harris, and I CC'd mayor-elect at the time, Brandon Johnson. And in it, I, really just talked about how really disgusted I am and how they really handled this rollout process, because we had just saw that our neighboring community, Woodlawn, which is not too far from South Shore, what happened with them, and how they were lied to for a while. And then eventually they just put like hundreds of migrants in the old school building. So we were fearing that this would happen to us because they just did it without the community. And Woodlawn fought. They did. They had protests. There were people who stood outside when the buses came and blocked the buses. They were arrested. One of the men is banned from coming near the school, which is not a school, it's a shelter. So he's banned from being there, even though he lives in the community. So we saw all these things happen before We just knew that some people already felt defeated, felt like, well, what's the purpose? So we had two things happen. We had the mayor and our aldermen give us a last minute meeting notice. So it was on Monday. The meeting was going to be on Thursday. By Tuesday, it was already full. So everybody couldn't register. So Wednesday, I wrote the letter. By Wednesday night, they opened it back up again. They sent out emails to everyone, said, okay, we're going to open it up and we're going to move the meeting to another location because there was so many people who had registered. So they moved it to another location at the last minute. And the day of, we held a press conference, a small press conference in front of the school. When we were finished with the press conference, the word was that in the meeting, they were not going to allow people to speak, that we would have to write down our questions on a card. So they gaslit us. They get literally, like, it was a combination of days and days of just gaslight. Like, it was just like, everything was just crazy. So when we got there, myself and another organizer, we was like, we're not gonna, you're not gonna do that to us. We're not gonna just not be able to talk, because at least in Woodlawn, they allowed them to talk. And so we went around the room and we told people, tear your cards up, put it up, we're talking. They can't kick us all out of here. If you have a question, you raise your hand and you speak your question. Everybody was everybody was like, yes. I mean, it was nobody saying I'm scared. No, they was like, yes, you're right. And then they kind of heard us. So then they said, okay, we're going to allow you guys to speak. So it's like, well, you're going to let, of course you are. And there was a panel of people on the stage. And it was disgusting, to be honest. It was very disgusting because how they were looking down at us. They didn't talk. Well, they tried to talk, the audience. We shifted the meeting because it already was hostile, I would say, just because of how we found out about it. We were already upset. But we didn't really want to hear what they had to say because we recognized, based on the Woodlawn situation, that it was already a done deal. So we didn't want to really hear what they had to say. We wanted them to hear how we felt.
Right.
So that was why when you saw that meeting, it was people just screaming and yelling, because we've been through so much. We've been through COVID, shut down, schools shut down, everything. We've been through the teachers union going on strikes. We've been through, in this particular community, was devastated when the Chicago Housing Authority, when they tore down the projects, we received a large amount of residents from there without resources. Mm-hmm. So our community is still really, we're healing from that, I should say. Right. And then we also in 2013 dealt with a whole bunch of school closures in our community, and it was all this. So we're still dealing with all the trauma of all of the systemic racism things they've done, and they're gonna add this on top of it. And what makes it so interesting, real quick, is that this community, like I said, we're a very active community, and we've fought to reduce crime in our community, to really create spaces for young people to get to know our neighbors know each other. We're working on trying to redevelop we want to see development. We want to see improvements because we've been in a downward spiral already. We're trying to come up. And so to say you're finna dump people who are not vetted, people we don't know their backgrounds. And then what's really tricky too is that this school is located it's a 3-block radius around the school. There's houses, people's residential homes. So it's not on a main street per se. It's really in the middle of, it's not meant to be like a homeless shelter or a migrant. It's not made for that.
Well, let's pause there, because you gave them a lot to think about, and see what the Shamika and Will have to ask you.
Yep.
All right. I don't know the order we're going in, but I'll throw out a softball question here. I mean, so I think that one of the reasons that this video attracted so much attention, I watched this with a couple of my buddies online, and I mean, it's a funny video. If I'm correct about this, this is the one where someone has a sign that says "Build the damn wall," that's in the audience, all this stuff. But I think one of the things that made this go so viral was that it was a middle-class Black community. So it was very hard to stereotype as racist. It was just all these taxpayers standing up and saying, no, we don't want 1,000, whatever it is, 982 fighting age men dumped into the community. So, I mean, softball question, what were you guys worried about? We often hear that objection to illegal immigration is just based on racism. It's a clash between whites and minorities. What are the problems that you foresee from the 900 guys just going into the school? or the building?
Right. Well, first of all, it's 500 every
500 for you,
7
but
days.
the rest are in Woodlawn.
It's
Oh,
going to
yeah,
be,
yeah,
well,
okay, fair.
they said 500 and it's every 7 days. So we're going to have, it's going to be a transient situation. We're going to have 500 people just coming in as a processing respite center. They're going to be processing people on our blocks.
Right.
So that's a problem in itself right there.
So if I can pause that for 1 second. So every 7 days, it would be a different 500 people that came across the border from Guatemala, Haiti, Mexico, Poland, whatever. They would just be going into that building. They'd be there for 6 days, and then they would come out.
They will come out. That's what they were saying. Yep. It could be up to 500. First, they start off with 250, and then it was like, oh, it could be up to 500. Descending on our block.
Right.
Sitting around.
And why would that be a bad thing? These asylum seekers just want to work hard. They're fleeing wars overseas. What could you guys object to?
Well, we could object to the fact that they're not working. That's number one. They're here. There's no jobs. They're not working. And we've seen them at the other location. It's a lot of people that hang out because where are they going to go? And then also we were told in the other location that the ones who are hanging out are now starting to engage with the gang element. So the community, even though our community is a working class community, we still have a lot of problems in our community. We still have gang element. We still have a lack of disinvestment in our community. So it's like, well, where would they go? What would they do? You know, there's no jobs literally for them to go to in walking distance from that school. And the jobs that are there, they're owned by their foreign people who own those jobs, and they typically don't hire from the community. So we have those issues as well. But one of the main sticking points was the fact that the city was telling us that they were going to provide the migrants 24-hour security in a neighborhood where we could barely get the police to come for issues that we have. There were neighbors who spoke about break-ins that had occurred, and it took the police hours to come. So we don't get a great response time, and most of that is because we're also lacking a police. Like, we have a shortage of police staff. So that's a little scary. And then there's a lot of elders that live in those houses that surround the school. And so they're concerned about that. And then when we think about just like a transient population of people coming in and out and they don't have jobs and they're hanging around, how is that going to impact our property value? It's going to impact our value.
I agree.
So those are some of the things that we're concerned about. And rightfully so. And then also they had rules. They put up the rules for the facility. The rules were literally for the inside of the facility. Like, for example, there's no drinking or drugs inside of the facility. But around the school, in front of people's houses, you can do that. Is that okay? You know what I mean? Like things like that is concerning to us. We don't want that. And then also, again, bottom line, that building belongs to the community. We have ideas and plans that we presented back in 2014, 2016. The aldermen agreed. Even the past mayor agreed to those plans. And if we talk about, for example, Brandon Johnson talks about the youth. We had a situation downtown. We had all these youth that descended on downtown. And he said, well, you can't do anything. I mean, they need services, whatever. So you're saying that while giving a building that could go to the youth to non-citizens.
Right.
They're also looking at park spaces. They're actually pushing families out of park programs to house migrants into them or illegal citizens in there.
Right.
So think about that. I mean, you have parents who have to travel now outside of their community to put their child into a program because the program that's right outside their home they can't use because now it's full of non-citizens. So they're handling this situation really bad. It's actually impacting the lives of people who work hard and who've been here all their lives. And then for the Black community in particular, because we've been fighting so hard for things and the city just don't listen, it makes it that much more worse. It's like you're compiling trauma on top of us and we're already coping with issues as it is. And violence in Chicago is out of control. It's out of control, but I would say a lot of our communities are working hard, and that's the misperception too. we're not just sitting around saying we don't snitch. That's not happening here. Okay. Most of us we work full-time jobs and we're all pretty much activists because we have to be. We're forced to be.
I
Well,
have
I
a
want to get to
question.
this. Go ahead.
So it came across my timeline a lot because there were a lot of people saying, "Isn't this what you voted for?" So
Yeah, I
how
figured one of
do
us was going to ask that.
the residents feel about that aspect of it?
Yeah.
What are they saying? What's the sentiments?
So the first thing I always say is this. We know Chicago is a Democratic town, it's strong, with that. But one of the things in the Black community here is that we have low voter turnout. A lot of people aren't voting. They don't vote. And my belief is that, and I've been involved for a long time, what I see is apathy. It's the disconnect. It's like, well, why would I vote when this is what happens when I do? Like, it's the same people that's running the same game, saying the same thing, and we're not seeing anything from it. So majority of our turnout is low in our community for what candidates are coming. So that's number one, what people need to understand. And then number two, we have a diverse group of people who vote for different. Some people, like, for example, some people, we had Vallis and we had Brandon Johnson at the end. We had those two candidates. Brandon Johnson did not win by a landslide. And so people need to understand that too. People also need to understand that not every Black person is about, defunding the police per se, even in Chicago. So the Black Community Collaborative, we did a survey on the Black community. We specifically targeted Black parents because we wanted to hear their voices, because oftentimes a lot of the rhetoric that we're hearing is rhetoric. And so we wanted to get factual information about how parents felt about security being in schools and around schools. And what we found with our survey, and we surveyed over 600, we had a small pool, but it was 600 parents. Out of 600 parents, majority at 70% said that they wouldn't mind having security in or around the school buildings. Because the fact is that some of these communities there's violence that's unchecked, that's happening. And most parents want to feel safe and that their children are safe. And so there's a misperception with that as well. But in terms of the voting, people vote, different vote, but for the most part, Black Chicago has low voter turnout. And it's because of the years and years, I believe, of people who run and they don't stick to their word. And in particular, Black neighborhoods we shouldn't look this way. I mean, our communities actually, at one point, we had viable communities. I've seen my community go up and I've seen it go down, and now we're in a building process. And I think that's what makes this migrant, so quote unquote, crisis a lot for us, because we're just trying to get stable. And now here you go with this. So.
Right.
So are you saying like the most people that run there are just like shiesty Democrats? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out, like, is there not a better crop of people that actually try, or you just kind of, I guess, I don't know, choose from the better of two evils or whatever?
That's how it always is. It's just exactly what you said. That's usually what we're left with. And you hope for the best. You just hope that the person who you choose is the person that's gonna go in and do what they say they're gonna do. But oftentimes in our community, we don't really ask for much too, so we're not really holding our elected officials accountable. We believe that once they get in office, especially if they're a Black candidate, that they're going to automatically represent our community. And what we found is that's not the case most of the time.
Chicago's also unique
Right.
in its machine and the way the politics works in Chicago, right?
It is.
That's why people have been making fun of Chicago for years in, the dailies and the "we don't want nobody sent," right? There's just been this understood, remember when Matt Rosenberg was on and he was talking about, the history of the politics of the city, some of it racial, but some of it just the pay to play politics, right? I mean, they've been a little bit removed from that, so it kind of the stink is wearing off. But for a while, Shamika, they had three of their four governors, of the four consecutive governors, three of them went to prison. Three out of
Yeah,
four.
actually, just a quick
Wow.
interlude. One of them, I forget who spoke at SIU, but I was a first year grad student and went to Southern Illinois University, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. The governor's speaking. The governor's doing our honors banquet or whatever. And one of the people who was in front of me was this older gentleman, African black guy, and he turns around and asks me, "Is he out?" Because three of the governors had gotten locked up. I think it was Rauner. Like, it was a legitimate question. Like, is he out of prison?
Yeah,
So
Wow.
Blagojevich, of course, did a 15-year bid. But I do think, just as one comment on what Natasha said here, it's hard for people outside of Chicago not to be a little cynical about some of this. Because, I mean, I'm a former Chicagoan, and when I saw Lori Lightfoot, who was a bad mayor, like definitely on the far left side of the spectrum, but also like
a bad
tough person, but not really that good in a leadership role. A lot of issues in the city. When Lightfoot was voted out, it's like, okay, they've got some real candidates in that race. Things might get better. But the guy I think most people thought would win, Paul Vallis, who's just a mainstream centrist Democratic politician, lost to Brandon Johnson, who's again a fairly radical, kind of shisty former neighborhood guy
CTU
politician.
plant.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, famous CTU guy. I mean, most of us are from Chicago. Yes, long in bed with the teachers union. I believe former employee of the teachers union. So it's hard not to, isn't it? I guess the question would be, isn't it pretty predictable that something like this would happen? Like, if two out of the three candidates are running and saying things like Chicago will never stop being a sanctuary city, isn't it kind of critical that citizens go out there and vote for the guy who might not do that stuff?
But I know
Like,
that's where I guess the answer. But
everybody
can I
is
say
not.
something real quick though?
Of course,
Natasha? A lot of people from the outside will say, yeah, they got what they paid for. Blacks are generally Democrats, and they got a liberal mayor. Say you voted for. But let's be real. In Chicago, blacks probably vote more Democrat than they do everywhere else, but not any more than they do in any other city. What Chicago is, all the white liberals vote for the most.
Yeah, it was the white
person.
liberal wards that took Johnson over the top.
They
Yeah,
vote
I mean,
for,
that
so
is
the
one
blacks
fair
were going to
point.
vote for the Democrat anyway. He beat Vallis because Vallis couldn't get the white liberals.
Now, of course, all these candidates are Democrats. There was no Republican in the race.
Right,
It was like
exactly.
2 or 3
But that
Democrats
was
in
the
the final
talking
election.
point. But that was one of the talking points that they tried to push. That narrative was that Paul Vallis
was a Republican.
And
And the way they do it is that he got endorsed by the Republicans, probably because the Republicans probably said, we don't have a dog in the race, but he's the least, leftist one. So let's support him. Police unions.
And it was so bad that they even put signs on in the Black community. They tagged MAGA to his signs
They paid a hat on his
as
face.
Gotta be kidding.
and I thought I was like, that's just stupid.
Oh.
It's just, I mean, like, that's like, why? Like, and some people fell for it, so the thing is, like, a lot of people in our community might not know what they don't know, and so it's good to be able to, like, one of the things we like to do is really share facts about stuff, because a lot of the times our people are guided by non-facts, so the facts is what really, really helps people understand things. Because I know for Vallis, it was all about him being connected to or getting the endorsement of the FOP.
Yeah, that's what
and to me, it was just like, okay, but the CTU they're just as racist. If you want to talk about racism and the unions, and we want to, compare the two, if you want to do that, I can
get into the
break it down for you.
Black teachers. Let's not start to get into the black teacher topic.
Right, that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, but so that's kind of how it was. But I'm like, an endorsement, someone working and being funded and all that is two different things. But a lot of people didn't kind of get that.
But talk about this. So you kind of partnered with the other community, and obviously you got the focus because of the viral video and such.
Mm-hmm.
But Woodlawn was first. So for those people who say, you're just being, unfair to them, and these people need a place, and you just thinking the worst. Like Will said, what's the worst that can happen, right? Why don't you want them there? Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen by going by there, or the people you talk to? Because I know the people from Woodlawn have partnered with you in the protest. Like, what are they seeing? Like, what are they doing? Obviously, you said they're not working, but what are they doing?
Yeah.
Because my guess would be that the 7-day rotation may lessen the fact, but it's still a group of people there. But if there's no jobs, it will be a lot of strain on resources, right? If you don't have a job, now granted, the government's giving them some money, but there's the part you mentioned where they may partner with gangs. There's part where they're hanging out and drinking. There's a part where, that kind of thing. But I guess that is part of the problem too. Like, because they'll tell you it's families, but it'll be a lot of able-bodied young men. But even if
Right. And then that was
even if
one
it
of the
is
things too.
right, but even if it is family, then you
Mhm.
have the issue in your schools because the kids are going to go to school. So it's a strain on the school, it's a strain on the resources, a strain on everything. So what has Woodlawn been seeing? Because they had them for a few weeks there before they were
Yeah.
going to be in the
So
open.
Woodlawn is a shelter, like that's more of a shelter. It's not, it's a little longer. They get to stay there a little longer.
Okay.
Whereas the one that they're proposing in my neighborhood is going to be a respite center. And for 7 days they could stay, and then they'll kind of shuffle people in and out that way. But they started off telling us that it was going to be for families. And a couple of days ago, I called the alderman's office, and she said that they're telling her that it's going to also be men, that they changed it to men, because what we're seeing, that's the other thing too. On the TV, they're showing us like these families and stuff, and that really is hard to see, women with babies on the floor. That's not a good sight to see. But that's not what we're seeing in our neighborhood per se. Like I'm seeing men. Like it's a lot of
Are they?
young
I'm
men.
sorry to interrupt you, but are they there yet? Because I know they told you the last minute on the Thursday, but the date that they didn't give you that much time. So the meeting was on Thursday, and they were supposed to come in on Tuesday.
They were supposed to come that following week. We filed that injunction immediately. We filed that TRO. We were on that fast because once I realized what happened with Woodlawn, it was like we knew that was the only way we had to go was a court route. But at Woodlawn, what they're reporting is they are reporting, like I said earlier, that they're noticing the men interact with the gang element, and that they've noticed that there's a lot of just people hanging out, on and around people's
Talk about the cars.
There's a lot of cars. They sit out in their cars. There's people selling stuff out of their cars. And what's different about Wadsworth from South Shore is that at least Wadsworth is actually 3-block radius of parkland. And the other 4-part area is where people's houses are, but it's separated by the alley and garages, and then there's like a block. That's not going to be how we would literally have people hanging out in front of people's houses, like literally. So that's another reason why I just emphasize how it's just inappropriate. But yeah, they're hanging out. I heard they were doing some people were doing fixing cars on the street. They're laying on grass, leaning on people's garages. And then just about, I think last week, we saw in the media that someone from Wadsworth, one of the migrants from Wadsworth, got caught stealing downtown thousands of dollars of merchandise, but that was his third felony arrest. And I think the reason why it became a media topic was because he got caught downtown. What he did the other 2 times, I'm not aware of, but that was his third felony. And it's been other people. There's been a stabbing. A migrant had stabbed another migrant. It's crazy. So just think about that, and the fact that we hear gunshots in our neighborhood. I can't imagine having that on top of what we're already trying to get rid of in terms of, just trying to improve the conditions of our community. It's just difficult. And I'm not saying that migrants are all criminals or anything like that. I know there's some that are great migrants, but that are great citizens or to be citizens. But if you're putting 500 people, you're going to have some criminals in there. It's going to be some, so we're not going to be playing with that and pretending like that's not a fact.
Well, what I don't understand is why they don't see, Shamika, what do you think about this? That the optics of it. So not so much the border issue, but the optics of, we'll get to something Brandon Johnson, he's been mayor for 4 days now, what he said. But the optics is bad enough allowing people in. That's a whole separate thing. But then it's like the services and the support they get is greater than the others. We have this problem in New York. What's interesting about New York, you all would love this because we talked about this. Will and Shamika, you remember when DeSantis got in trouble, Abbott too, but DeSantis specifically, because he bussed migrants to Martha's Vineyard. And it was so bad that even conservatives it was a boss move. It was hilarious, but he's going to pay for it politically, they thought, right? So not only did he not, but circle back. Let's look at what's happening today. It's months later. Currently in New York, Eric Adams is busing people to other parts of the state. Right. So he's doing the exact same thing. He's taking migrants, putting them on a bus and shipping them to the other counties. So now they're all suing and that kind of thing. But here's the kicker, which ties into the thing that people make this about race. So I get why it stands out that Natasha and the group, because they're Black, like Will said, a working class community talking about this. But this affects everyone, regardless of where it is. Obviously, you don't want it across the street in front of your house. But so Eric is busing these people to different areas. But then everybody, and they're doing injunctions. They like, we don't want them here. We don't have the space and the resources. But what he's saying is, and the New York citizens aren't noticing this, is that we'll pay for it. So he's paying for the transportation. If they put them up in hotels, New York City tax dollars are paying for the hotel. So they get a migrant issue from a proximity standpoint, and the city's still paying the tab. So it's running up all this money. So that's also, so tell me what you think about that, Shamika. But also I think it's a problem because it goes back to what it really is, which is an American problem. It's a problem for the country. Too many people coming in, no control, no vetting, but then it's a strain on all the resources. So like in Chicago, what I hear people saying about Natasha's situation is, that's bad, we should help them out. But they'll say, well, we didn't ask for the sanctuary city. Brandon Johnson ran on that. Move them to their neighborhood. But even it's better to have them in somebody else's neighborhood, I guess. But who you think is going to foot the bill, even if they are on the north side? It's still coming out of your tax dollars, and it's still going to affect your resources.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for me, you know how I feel about illegal immigrants. I don't think they should be here. I think they should be shipped right back where they came from. Mm-hmm. I don't think we should have any type of sanctuary cities. And thank God I don't live in one. I just feel bad because, just wait until the loud music start. It's going to be loud music, and there's going to be no patent leather shoes for little girls anywhere. You won't be able to find them because they'll be all on the Hispanics, because, they dress them up every single day in dresses and patent leather shoes. I just think this is it's crazy what's happening. And I don't understand. Like, I'm glad, I'm not glad this is happening in Chicago, but I'm glad that it's getting nationwide attention. And I'm glad that it's Black people that are speaking up, so that, like I think Will said earlier, it can't just be said that it's racist, because I think a lot of people have let it kind of fly under the radar because, a white person is complaining about it. But when you really sit down and see how this can affect your community, then it becomes, something that people will pay attention to, I think, across the United States. And so I'm happy that it's happened where it's happening.
Well, and
in terms of what you said about DeSantis, actually, I think that was a really boss move, for want of a better description. Like, if you, from a political consulting perspective, like, okay, you guys want these illegal aliens or undocumented migrants or whatever term you prefer to use. You announce you're a sanctuary city. But if you're like far Rockaway, New York, you're not making any statement. Like, you're not doing anything brave about that. So DeSantis and Abbott were like, okay, well, let's take these illegal migrants and let's ask them. They're not, kidnapping them anymore, but let's put them on buses and send them to Chicago, to New York. I actually think if I were Ron DeSantis, I would take this one level up. I wouldn't send them to stable, like Black or Irish neighborhoods or something. I'd send them back to Martha's Vineyard. Like every place like that. I'd send them to the Radcliffe campus, anywhere, Oberlin, Ohio, anywhere where they constantly make these statements about what brutes the average working class person is. Okay, here's 1,000 warriors from Guatemala. You decide what to do with this busload of Mayan dudes.
Any college that reads the land acknowledgement. Go.
Yeah, I mean, okay, these are the people that are in the land acknowledgement. These are some indigenous Americans, the descendants of the Aztecs. Here, take them. And I think you're going to see the conversation radically shift as this happens.
Right. And then just thinking about those neighborhoods, those communities, I say neighborhood because I'm Chicagoan, but the resources, where it's resource rich. If you really want to actually help, which is why it's confusing to us, is like, are you really trying to help them, or are you trying to hurt us? Like, we're not sure what's happening here, because if you're not trying to hurt us, number one, you would pour resources the resources that you're giving to them, you will pour them into us so that we could be able to, come out of the situation that they've put us in, because they put us here. We're here because of their failed policies and things like that. But instead, you're going to give money, resources, all of our tax dollars to non-citizens for their, like, it's so confusing. In Chicago, we have the highest, African Americans in Chicago have the highest homelessness rate and poverty rate here in the city. So it's like I said, don't see it's a slap in the face. It's
How
like
can it be homeless people? Wait. I don't believe that, Natasha. I think you're making that up. You're telling me that there's homeless people on the street in Chicago. That can't be possible because the migrants have a place to stay. So if the migrants have the place to stay, how can the citizens be on the street?
Isn't that something? And what's so crazy is this. I've been in Chicago all my life, and I worked in social service for years. And there was a point where we had systems in place where we were really working with the homeless population. I have never in my life seen so many homes. We have tent cities here. I've never seen a tent city in Chicago, ever. We literally have that here. And now there's groups that's saying in the news, press conference, when Johnson came in, day one, he did a few executive orders.
Yeah, I was going to read that one. I have it here. He signed an executive order to establish a new deputy mayor position. And that deputy mayor will be the deputy mayor for immigration, migrant, and refugee rights. Not to help usher them through, process them, but rights. It says the person takes on the role and responsibility to assist in the efforts to address immediate needs and the long-standing policy and programmatic goals to ensure the efficacy of Chicago's status as a
Charles, you probably know this more than me. You were more active politically in the city, but is there anything like that for Black Americans or just poor people in general?
It's nothing like that. And that's the thing. It's like you have that. In addition, he stood with a group in Little Village that said, we are going to house 1,400 migrants in the next few weeks. They're going to give housing to them.
They get
food. Have Black people, like literally I had to work.
Well, why don't you, maybe the Black people aren't that, Natasha, maybe you aren't as innovative as you should be. Maybe you all should leave, take a trip to Guatemala or something and come back to
I've heard people say that.
And then they just give you a house.
People said that.
I actually had a buddy. So people actually, to some extent, did that without even making jokes. Like under COVID, it was very, very difficult to travel. It was very, very difficult to re-enter the country if you'd been outside the country legally, if you were unvaccinated. And a good number of people, you guys can check this out, just walked across the border because we weren't effectively processing. It's like, okay, I got my American IDs. I'm back now. What the are you going to do?
What are you going to do?
So, when you stop enforcing the law, stuff happens. Like if you don't have a border and you're not stopping people at the border, not only illegal migrants, but also your own citizens who are sick of your stupid laws, terrorists. Anyone else can simply enter the country. Like Natasha's point, like we have tent cities in Chicago. I don't want to come across as like, again, sort of brutal and cynical, but it's really easy to stop that. Like that's in one place. All you have to do is go, give 10,000 citations for violating the vagrancy laws and take them dudes on a bus to Cook County Jail.
Right.
That's it. Like all you have to do with illegal immigrants is after one perfunctory asylum hearing, send them back to the country that they came from. This isn't, I'm not exaggerating. This is not very difficult to do.
If anything, you have ones that commit crimes like that. We're still trying to figure out what are you doing with those?
Like, the people.
How are they still here?
Right.
What?
Yeah, it's
and
absolutely
there's
ridiculous.
No checks and balances,
and it's so easy to get in because they get deported and they come right back in because they know how to get in. Once you know the system, you know the system.
It's just a matter of not enforcing the law. Like last for me, but I don't really see this as racial at all. Like the cities that are the most ridiculous with this to me are like working class white cities, like Portland. Comes to mind, Eugene, San Francisco by the Tenderloin. But if you just set up a rule that, sex and brawling are fun. If you set up a rule that people can do these things in the streets with no punishment, you're going to get more of it. Yeah. Like in San Francisco, they actually have an app that tracks human crap on the streets because there's so much of it. So, you're two options. You can seriously, I promise you, everything I say on the show is true. You can look that up. Yeah, and Charles has seen it. We've talked.
And we need one in New York. I'm just saying.
Yeah, in New York, you need rat tracker. The rats look like dogs in New York.
Yes, it means humans crap on the street, Natasha.
Yes, it's a human waste tracker.
Well, they got 70,000 homeless people.
Yes, and the
Yeah.
reason they have 70,000 homeless people is that if you go to San Francisco and you're homeless, they can't move your tent. It's legally considered your temporary abode.
home.
You know, they give you a subsidy. They give you what we can't call an Obama phone anymore. It's like a Trump or a Biden phone. And it's like 2 iPhones back in the cycle. It's not a bad phone. But I mean, like, you get all this stuff if you're homeless. And so you have, again, and these are white liberals.
And it's
You have all
warm.
these goofy purple-haired liberals trying to figure out why, if you give people $20,000 a year and an iPhone to be bums, you keep getting bums. The answer,
Exactly.
if you want fewer bums, the answer is to enforce the vagrancy laws and give people a choice between, you know, that jail on Mission Street or a bus out of town. It's not hard to do. The question is just, will we, as urban people of whatever shade, elect leaders that'll do it? Boom.
And here's the proof that it's not racist on the other side. So every time a white person says anything that you don't like, you can just say, you can get your rubber stamp and say, boom, boom, right on the forehead, racist. However, I recall 3 prominent Black people. Steph Curry is the most recent, Dave Chappelle, and our own Natasha Dunn. All property owners that say, well, I don't want my community to change. I don't want you. Right? Did you see that Steph Curry just was it? I think this was this week. He was like, they were going to build something in his community, or they were going to move. It wasn't migrants, but they were going to allow a different income class and everything. And he went down and like, no, I'm having none of that. Right, Shamika?
Yeah. And people got upset with him.
They didn't get upset with Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle said the same thing. I will take my money out if you let these people in this community. Right? That's not a
for me,
thing. You don't build up equity so somebody can tear it down.
And it's, for me, it's not even, it's not, like I said, it's not the people. It's not about the migrants as migrant people, individuals. It's the way the system is operating in a way where it can dismantle my community. They're not operating in a way that's mindful and respectful of our community and our stability and our vitality here. I mean, you can't just dump people, like hundreds of people, into a community with no resources, no long-term housing plan. Like, that's not going to work. You know, it's only going to create more poverty, more blight, more, you know what I mean? Like, it's not improving the conditions of our community. So that's like the main, I think for us, the main reason. And when we work so hard for what we have and put in that extra community service time, and you're going to just plop some people that also, by the way, here in Chicago, they're fighting for non-citizens to have voting rights on the elected school board. So, you know, and again, that's a problem, because if you're going to dump them in our community and they're new citizens, they're going to have a right to tell us what's best. Or it could be like, that's going to be a problem. You know what I'm saying? And that's not about racism. That's a reality of like not being fair.
You're a lot nicer than me, because for me, it's the people. You know, I said a couple times on the show, and people won't. I mean, it's a very difficult thing to wrap your mind around, because I try to be as fair and honest as possible. And so we talk about these things and say the left, and people say Democrats. I say, no, I don't. I think it was last week or so. I said, I don't think most Democrats want open borders, technically, right? However, it's one of two things. Either, like you said, the way they package it, Natasha, maybe they tell them something. They don't say, you know, the Democrat politician doesn't say, I want the borders to be open, vote for me. They say, you know, we have to be compassionate. They use all the buzzwords. You're like, yeah, that's the right thing. That's one. And then the other side, they don't understand the ramifications of bad policy. So they think if they just don't want open borders, that's enough. They don't need to do anything hard. They don't want to get their hands dirty. So I talked to some people, Democrats, see, the right's wrong. They think that we want open borders. We don't want open borders. And we understand that the border is a problem, but it's complicated. I'm like, well, what do you mean by it's complicated? Well, it's complicated because these people come here and they want to leave where they are and they need to go somewhere better. So what can we do? Oh, well, that's their policy. I'm like, no. You got to keep going. We agree that the border shouldn't be open. We agree we can't let everyone in. Why do you throw your hands up and say, oh, well, it's complicated? No, you have to solve the problem. And the problem is they can't get in. Well, what if they do? Doesn't matter. There's a process to get here. We as citizens in this government decides what the process is. You follow the process. Well, everybody else can't come in, period. So what do? I don't let them in. Well, how do you stop them? I don't let them in. You don't want me to answer that. They can't get in.
Yeah,
I would say, so what would you do if you were president? I would say, I would go to the implausible deniability. I said, do whatever you got to do, but they don't get to come in. And then I turn and walk away. And
Yeah,
whatever they do,
crazy.
it's like you told them to do it. No, I just told them they couldn't come in.
It's crazy because in Chicago, Mayor Lightfoot, before she left, filed a emergency order because we didn't have the resources, the financial means to support the influx of migrants. So in my head, I'm like, if you don't have financial means, you clearly don't have the housing set up, then why are we continuing to accept people in here? It doesn't make sense, so that's the whole thing too. It's like a backwards way of thinking that you're going to continue to have people coming in and you don't have the adequate resources to support them. And then we're supposed to be left with the concept of figuring it out ourselves. The community has to figure it out now. We have to help you all think about ways to put, like, where they go. And I tell people, don't think that's not your job. We're not supposed to be thinking about that. We need to think about what we were thinking about before, which was how do we improve the conditions of our community? And we need to be demanding for our city and our state to put resources into those efforts. Redirect the money into supporting the citizens that's been here for a while and that deserves and have the right to it because we pay into the taxes
for it, right? Shamika?
What I've noticed is I hear a lot of Black people around here complaining about not being able to find affordable housing. And I've seen that a lot of landlords actually give the housing that most Black people could afford to the illegal immigrants, because so many times they'll pile up, they'll pay the extra money that Black person wasn't paying. Like, I've seen people's rent go up $300-400 and they're like, oh my goodness, I can't afford that. But they know they can get this group of illegal immigrants who will come up with the cash, whether it's because they're doing odd jobs or they're getting food stamps and they're getting all of this help and this aid. They can pay that extra money. So I'm seeing a lot of people around here be displaced because what used to be affordable housing for them has now gone up just a little bit, but it is affordable housing for the illegal immigrants that don't mind coming together and sharing a place.
You know what? That's interesting because that happened in Chicago when the Section 8 boom happened here. I noticed because I was a renter for a while and I couldn't get a Section 8 voucher. I couldn't get affordable. I was a market rate renter. And one of the things that I noticed was that in the areas that took the vouchers, it made the rents for people who were like myself higher. So because they were getting so much money from the government. So I could see that also being a way of doing it. And it only pushes us out more. Also in South Shore, we have the highest eviction rate too. And I think that could have something to do with it, is that when rents get high, and the people who are, you have a lot of subsidies and stuff like that, it does push the people who are working, can barely afford rent and other things out of those particular apartments, or housing. So that's another issue that we're pushing, is to say, hey, we have the highest eviction rate, our people need housing. So it's not fair to house them and not us.
So what is next in your fight?
So we're just going to keep fighting. I mean, the new mayor is in, he's installed, and we're going to hold him accountable. I mean, doesn't stop. I say we are activated. This has activated the Black community. It's a difficult conversation to have. A lot of people, we don't want to be seen as xenophobic, which I just learned what that word was. I had never heard of that word before. I'm like, they don't keep coming up with all these new words.
I'm xenophobic then.
But
yeah, pretty xeno.
I mean, but I'm not afraid of migrants. I'm not afraid of immigration. I'm not afraid.
Right.
I just don't like the fact that it feels like the government is putting these people against us, and it's just not right the way they're setting it up. I mean, they're not being transparent about this whole process. I believe there's something bigger going on that they're not communicating with us about. This is not just about the little old migrants that's coming into the country because they want opportunity. Is something else going on, because that's how it looks. Okay. Because every elected official literally in Chicago, and I'm dealing with another situation in another community, are saying the same thing. We don't know that they're coming. We didn't know this was going to happen. We don't know. First of all, how do you not know when we're a sanctuary city? That's number one. We're a sanctuary.
Right.
But Two, you should know what's happening with your schools, with your wards, with your like you should know. And if you don't know, that's a problem. So that in itself is enough for us to pause as a people to say, we can't have this. Because if it's not a transparent process, then it doesn't need to happen.
Well,
So we're just gonna keep pushing.
I was gonna stop, but I gotta ask you another question because you talked about voter apathy. So I have to ask, before this happened, not necessarily just this issue, but this issue as well, but just politically in general, I find a lot of regular working class people are focused on their lives, their jobs, and their families that they don't pay attention. So how much, I mean, it's harder for you because you're an activist, so the people in your circle know, but as you talk to cousins and friends and people around the neighborhood, how much would you say people are paying attention to all of these hot button issues that I joke with everyone else saying that people argue about on Twitter, but Twitter's not real. So like, do people go walk around the hood talking about J6? Do you know what J6 is?
No, what is J6?
January 6th.
That's the nickname they call when the people went into the Capitol.
Yeah, the one-day riot at the Capitol.
The riot at the Capitol.
Nobody's no. No. No,
do they talk about CRT?
When nobody's scared of that.
Do they talk about CRT? Transgenderism?
No,
do they talk about any of that?
Nobody's talking about CRT. Now, I know what that is. Nobody is talking about that. And I'm on the ground. I'm with the real people. No.
See, you all. I told you people out there that they don't talk either. Yeah.
Only Twitter. People I know is talking about that is people who are glued to TV, those channels.
All right. What about the LGBT or the trans issue? They have to be talking about that.
I mean, people are talking a little bit. People are concerned. I know there was a forum that happened, a candidate forum that we helped facilitate, and there were people in the audience who did ask that question in regards to our curriculum.
About in school, okay.
About in schools, like the LGBTQ, like not that, but just the whole sex ed and how it's leaning toward.
Oh, that's right. Illinois passed before I moved. They passed the gay rights bill that just like Black history, you have to teach gay history in class.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Shamika?
And so people, so
well, at least now they'll learn about the ancient Greeks again.
So there were people who are in our community concerned about that. They're like, can we at least have our children learn about Black history in America and what we've done? I mean, you've not done that right. So no, but these are not like roundtable discussions. People aren't talking about this.
I bet but wait, how about this? Shamika, are they talking about the price of shrimp and the price of bacon?
Yes.
And crab legs.
Yes.
That's your one, crab legs.
Yes, yes.
So they're talking about like economic stuff.
Yes. The personal economic issues, right?
And crime.
And crime.
You all do talk about crime. It's not
we talk about that all the time. That's something we deal with on a daily basis, unfortunately. Right. And now this migrant issue is definitely a hot topic in our community. I can tell you that right now.
Well, hopefully
this is actually really important. Just really quickly, in terms of what people actually talk about, like there's a huge difference between real life and like Twitter and Facebook. So, I mean, like just this guest from our old cities, like, yeah, we talk about crime, maybe like racism sometimes, migration, food. But I mean, all the stuff that you see in political ads, like the trans movement's coming to your classroom. Like, I actually agree with that, but it's not something that anyone really cares about. So it's important for candidates really in both parties to actually see what people are interested in and dealing with in real life. And I noticed like a real failure to do that.
But is that, I hate to get off the topic, Will, but is that possible? Because nowadays our politicians are celebrities. We talked about that before. They want likes and clicks. So they live in that world. So if you live in that world too long, you believe that world is reality. So then they go out on the campaign trail and they think, well, I don't know. Well, this must be what Natasha wants to talk about because this is what Matt Walsh was talking about on Twitter. So it must be important.
Well, that's the thing. And I think that's what made a whole bunch of politicians from Donald Trump to Bill Clinton back in the day so successful. They just totally ignored a lot of that stuff. I mean, like the whole thing with Donald Trump, I mean, at various points polled well above 20% of the black vote, didn't get that in the election. But the whole thing with Trump is that he would just say things that are forbidden, so he actually talked about immigration and said, I mean, everyone who comes to this country illegally is here illegally. rapists are coming over, murderers are coming over. There's a very high crime rate in Mexico. Now that's rude. Some might consider it a bit racist, although to me, most Mexicans are white. But I mean, the idea was you're not supposed to say this because in Twitter world, we can't say this. And I find that politicians that do say these things, whether I can think of guys running for mayor in Detroit all the way up to Trump and the other party, they tend to do very well. So the question is, how do you reconnect the people in that heavily online, isolated, upper middle class space with just ordinary citizens? And you have to figure out how to do it.
I've been trying to. I have no idea. So I think they're lost. But we got to try, but I don't know.
Tough
well, we could go on. We have to have you back to talk about some segment. We have people on to have a segment. What real people talk about? Natasha Dunn, co-founder of the Black Community Collaborative. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was fun meeting you guys.
Country to say, God bless the US of A, land of the free and a home of the brave. God get all of the praise. I got a country to say, cause I'm Patriot J and I'm saving a day.